My name is Helen Anderson, and I 16F am currently facing the most difficult situation of my life. I need advice on how to handle this, as everything seems to be falling apart. I grew up in what I thought was the ideal American family. We weren't rich at first, but we were happy, just me, mom, and dad living in our modest starter home. My father, James Anderson, was the hardest working man I've ever known. He built his transportation company from the ground up, starting with just 2 trucks and gradually expanding into a successful business. I remember how he'd sometimes come home covered in grease because he insisted on maintaining the trucks himself in the early days. Despite being exhausted, he would always make time to help me with my homework, especially math and physics. We shared a dream of me attending MIT one day. "With your brain, princess," he'd say, "you'll probably end up running NASA." Mom Sarah, 42F, worked as a restaurant manager back then. She was actually good at her job, though she'd constantly complain about it. "James," she'd say during dinner, pushing food around her plate, "I want to be a proper housewife. All these late nights are killing me." Dad would just smile and pat her hand, promising her that soon she'd be able to quit. He kept that promise. When I was 14, Dad's business really took off. He landed several major contracts, and suddenly we were moving into this beautiful 2-story house in one of the nicest neighborhoods in town. I got my own room, huge and bright with windows looking out over our backyard. I went wild with the decoration, pale purple walls, fairy lights everywhere, and this massive bookshelf Dad built himself. He spent an entire weekend on it, cursing under his breath when he thought I couldn't hear him, but beaming with pride when it was finally finished. Mom quit her job shortly after we moved, just like she'd always wanted. But instead of taking care of the house like she'd claimed she wanted to, she was barely ever home. It was always a lunch with the girls, or just a quick shopping trip, or my salon appointment ran late. Dad didn't seem to mind, he was too busy with his company, though he always made time for me. The last time we had ice cream together was just 6 months ago. It was a bright spring day, and Dad was telling me about one of his drivers calling in sick. "Guess I'll have to do the run myself tomorrow," he said, finishing his cone, just like the old days. "Can I come with you?" I asked, excited at the prospect of a road trip with Dad. He chuckled and ruffled my hair. "Not this time, princess. It's just a quick overnight trip. I'll be back before you know it." I remember hugging him extra tight that evening before bed. "Love you, Dad," I said, not knowing it would be the last time I'd ever say those words to him. The next morning, he left before dawn. Mom was still asleep, so Maria, our housekeeper, made his coffee and packed him a lunch. I heard him start his truck and pull out of the driveway. That was the last time I ever saw my father alive. The phone call came at 3:47 a.m. I know, because I was awake, unable to sleep due to that strange feeling in my stomach. I heard Mom scream from her bedroom, followed by the sound of something breaking, probably her bedside lamp. The next few hours are a blur in my memory, police officers in our living room, Maria holding me tight while Mom paced back and forth talking on the phone, words like "massive collision" and "died instantly" floating around me like dark butterflies. Dad's truck had collided with a semi that had jackknifed it across the highway. They said he didn't suffer, as if that was supposed to make it better somehow. But nothing made it better. Nothing could bring back my father. The funeral is mostly a haze in my mind. I remember staring at the closed casket, not really believing Dad was inside. Mom put on quite a show, wailing and practically throwing herself across the casket at one point. Looking back now, I realize how theatrical it all was, but at 16, I thought that's just how adults handled grief. It was at the funeral that I met Uncle Robert, 47M, and Aunt Patricia, 45F, for the first time. They looked so much like strangers, yet Uncle Robert had Dad's eyes, the same kind, crinkly corners when he tried to smile at me through his tears. "Helen," he said, kneeling down to my level, "I'm your father's brother. I'm so sorry we're meeting like this. Why haven't I met you before?" I remember asking, direct as only kids can be. A shadow crossed his face. "Your father and I, we had a disagreement many years ago. But none of that matters now. I had to come say goodbye to my little brother." After the funeral, Mom's grief evaporated like morning dew. Within weeks, she was meeting with Dad's lawyers, taking control of his company, and acting like she knew the first thing about running a transportation business. She started throwing around terms like restructuring and modernization, but it was obvious she was just making things up as she went along. I spent most of my time with Maria, who would shake her head sadly whenever Mom came home with shopping bags from expensive stores. "Your mother's spending money like water," Maria muttered one day while making my lunch. "Those poor drivers haven't been paid properly in weeks." She was right. Dad's employees started quitting one by one. These were men and women who'd worked for him for years, some since the beginning. I remembered their names, their faces, how they used to bring me little presents from their routes. Now they were leaving, unable to feed their families on promises and excuses. 3 months after Dad's death, Mom sold what was left of his company for a fraction of what it had been worth. She acted like she'd made some brilliant business decision, but everyone knew the truth: she'd run Dad's life's work into the ground. After the sale of Dad's company, Mom was rarely home, always out somewhere, and I spent most of my time studying alone in my room. My grades were still excellent. I was determined to keep my promise to Dad about MIT, but the house felt empty and cold. Then came that Sunday night. I was doing calculus homework in the kitchen when Mom burst through the door, giggling like a teenager. She wasn't alone. "Helen, sweetie," she called out, her voice thick with fake enthusiasm, "come meet Richard." Richard, 38M, was tall and wore an expensive suit that somehow still looked cheap. His smile didn't reach his eyes when he looked at me. "Helen," Mom said, clutching Richard's arm like a lifeline, "Richard and I got married last weekend. He's your new father. We're going to be a proper family again." "I already had a proper family," I said, my voice shaking. "I already have a father." Richard's fake smile disappeared. "Listen here, young lady," he said, his voice stern, "your mother and I are married now. You need to accept that and show some respect." "You're not my father," I spat back. "You'll never be my father." "See what I mean, Richard?" Mom turned to him. "Difficult child. Needs discipline." But Richard moving in was just the beginning. Within a week, his mother Gloria, 65F, his sister Janet, 36F, and his 12-year-old niece Madison had all moved in too. They took over the house like an invading army, rearranging furniture and changing the decor Mom and Dad had picked out together. Mom didn't seem to mind. She and Janet became instant best friends, spending hours shopping and gossiping. Gloria took over the kitchen, complaining about Maria's cooking until Mom fired her. I lost the only person who still cared about me in that house. Then came the final blow. I came home from school one day to find Madison in my room that Dad had built the bookshelf in, my room with the purple walls and fairy lights. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Aunt Sarah said I could have this room," Madison smirked. "It's bigger than the guest room, and I need space for all my things." "Get out!" I screamed. "This is my room." "Not anymore," she taunted, throwing my books off the shelves. I lost it. I lunged at Madison, and we both went down in a tangle of arms and legs. I pulled her hair while she scratched at my face, both of us screaming. Richard and Mom ran in, pulling us apart. "Helen!" Mom shrieked. "How dare you? Go to your new room right now." "No. This is my room. Dad gave it to me." Richard grabbed my arm roughly. "Your father is dead," he snarled. "This is my house now, and you'll do as you're told." They locked me in the small guest room for 2 days, only letting me out for school and bathroom breaks. My books and things were piled in boxes in the corner. Dad's bookshelf was thrown out with the trash. Through the wall, I could hear Madison playing music in my old room and Mom laughing with Janet downstairs like nothing was wrong. A few weeks after the room incident, I was heading to the bathroom late at night when I heard voices from downstairs. I crept to the top of the stairs, staying in the shadows. "The girl is becoming more difficult every day," Richard was saying. "She's disrupting our family harmony. Have you considered finding her another home?" My heart stopped. "You mean adoption?" Mom asked, and my blood ran cold at how thoughtful she sounded. I suppose that could work, Mom continued. She's still young enough. It would be better for everyone, Janet added. Madison's afraid of her after that attack, and honestly, she doesn't fit in here anymore. I ran back to my room, buried my face in my pillow, and told myself they couldn't mean it. Mom wouldn't give me away. She couldn't. I pushed the conversation to the back of my mind, convincing myself it was just talk. 2 weeks later, Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia showed up at the door unexpectedly. "Happy Sunday, Helen," Uncle Robert said, hugging me tight. His eyes narrowed when Richard walked past, ignoring us completely. Mom had thrown together a hasty dinner, probably embarrassed that Dad's brother might judge her. The tension around the table was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Mom cleared her throat. "Actually, Robert, Patricia, I'm glad you're here. There's something I need to discuss." Something in her tone made my stomach clench. "Helen isn't happy here," Mom continued, not looking at me, "and frankly, we're not happy either. She doesn't fit in with our new family dynamic. I've decided to put her up for adoption." The words hit me like a physical blow. The conversation I'd overheard hadn't been just talk after all. "I thought," Mom continued, her voice casual as if she were discussing the weather, "since you and Patricia don't have children of your own, you might want to take her. If not, I'll start looking for other families." The room spun. I couldn't breathe. Uncle Robert's chair scraped back so violently it fell over. "We'll take her," he thundered, his face red with fury, "and you, Sarah, are the most despicable excuse for a mother I've ever seen." Richard started to stand, but one look from Uncle Robert made him sink back into his chair. "Patricia," Uncle Robert said, his voice gentler, "help Helen pack her things. We're leaving now." Aunt Patricia wrapped an arm around my shaking shoulders and led me upstairs. We packed quickly, throwing my clothes and few remaining possessions into bags. I was crying so hard I could barely see. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart," Aunt Patricia kept whispering. "We've got you now." I walked out of that house without looking back at Mom. She didn't try to stop me, didn't try to say goodbye. The last thing I heard as Uncle Robert closed the car door was Madison asking if she could have my new room too. Now I'm sitting in Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia's guest room, my new room, I guess, trying to process everything that's happened. They're being incredibly kind, but I'm still in shock. Did my own mother really just give me away like I was nothing? Like the last 16 years meant nothing? I know staying with Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia is the right choice. They clearly care about me more than Mom does, but I can't help feeling lost and betrayed. How do I move forward from this? How do I trust anyone again? Have any of you dealt with something similar? Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1, thank you all for your supportive comments on my last post. A lot has happened in the past 3 months, and I want to share some updates. Living with Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia has been a complete change from my old life. They've transformed their home office into my permanent bedroom, and Aunt Patricia helped me design it exactly how I wanted. We spent a whole weekend painting it pale blue, Dad's favorite color, and setting up my study area. Uncle Robert even built me a new bookshelf, similar to the one Dad made but with additional features for my growing collection of physics and engineering books. The transition to Riverside Prep was initially challenging, but in a good way. The academic standards are much higher than my old school, which is exactly what I need for my MIT goals. I'm taking advanced placement courses in physics, calculus BC, and computer science. My physics teacher, Dr. Thompson, reminds me a lot of Dad. She has the same passion for explaining complex concepts and stays after school to help me with extra problems. Last week, I ranked first in the statewide physics Olympiad. When I called Uncle Robert to share the news, he left work early to take me out for ice cream, just like Dad used to. He and Aunt Patricia were more excited about my victory than I was. They framed the certificate and hung it in the living room, right next to Dad's old company photos that they'd carefully preserved. The contrast between my old and new life becomes clearer every day. Here, my academic achievements are celebrated, not seen as a disruption to family harmony. When I'm working on complex problems late at night, Aunt Patricia brings me hot chocolate and sits with me, asking about what I'm learning. She might not understand all the physics, but she genuinely wants to know. Uncle Robert has been helping me plan for MIT. He's connected me with several of his business associates who are MIT alumni, and they've been providing valuable advice about the application process. One of them even offered me a summer internship at his engineering firm, a perfect addition to my college application. But it's not all about academics. Aunt Patricia has been teaching me to bake, something I never had time for in my old house. Every Sunday, we try a new recipe. Sometimes they turn out great, sometimes they're disasters, but we always end up laughing. It's during these moments that I feel most at home. The therapy sessions they arranged for me have been helping too. Dr. Martinez has been amazing at helping me process everything that happened. She's helped me understand that what Mom did wasn't my fault, and that it's okay to be angry about it. Speaking of Mom, she tried to contact me once through social media. Her message was all about how she misses me and how things are different now, at home. Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia left the decision entirely up to me, supporting whatever choice I wanted to make. I chose to block her. I'm not ready for contact, and honestly, I'm not sure I ever will be. I've been thinking a lot about Dad lately. Last night, I found some old photos of him in his first truck, covered in grease but smiling proudly. Uncle Robert saw me looking at them and shared stories about their childhood, stories I'd never heard before. Apparently, Dad had always been the responsible one, looking out for his little brother despite being younger himself. It helped me understand why Uncle Robert was so quick to take me in. My new school counselor is helping me prepare a strong application package for MIT. With my academic performance, extracurricular activities in robotics club, and the upcoming summer internship, she believes I have a solid chance. Every time I make progress toward this goal, I feel closer to Dad. He might not be here physically, but I'm determined to make his dream for me come true. For those who asked for advice about similar situations in the comments of my last post, trust your instincts. Sometimes the family you choose, or the family that chooses you, is better than the one you were born into. I'm living proof of that. I used to think losing Dad was the worst thing that could happen to me. In a way, it was. But it also led me to Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia, who've shown me what unconditional love really means. They're not trying to replace my dad, they're helping me honor his memory by supporting the future he wanted for me. Update 2. I can't believe it's been 4 years since my last update. Life has changed so dramatically that sometimes I have to pause and remind myself how far I've come. The MIT acceptance letter arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Standing in Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia's kitchen, my hands were shaking so much I could barely open the envelope. When I saw the word congratulations, I burst into tears. Uncle Robert, who had taken the afternoon off work just to be there for this moment, hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Aunt Patricia was already on the phone, canceling her appointments for the day so we could celebrate. The scholarship news came a week later, a full merit-based ride. When I tried to thank them for all their support, Uncle Robert just shook his head and said, "Your father would be so proud of you, Helen. This is all you." But I know better. Without their unwavering support, I wouldn't be where I am today. My time at MIT has been everything Dad and I dreamed of and more. The campus became my second home, and the challenging coursework kept me focused. I double majored in computer science and business administration, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while participating in the robotics club and mathematics competition team. Every achievement felt like a step closer to honoring Dad's memory. The investment banking internship I landed at Goldman Sachs is going better than I could have imagined. The firm's technology division focuses on financing transportation and logistics companies, exactly the kind of business Dad used to run. My understanding of both the technical and business aspects makes me stand out. During my first week, I successfully debugged a critical algorithm in our logistics financing platform, saving the company millions in potential losses. My supervisor, Mr. Harrison, has become something of a mentor. Last week, he pulled me aside after a particularly successful client presentation. "You have a natural instinct for this business," he said. "It's rare to find someone who understands both the numbers and the human element." He doesn't know it's because I grew up watching my father build his company from scratch. Living in Boston has been an adjustment, but Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia visit regularly. They've turned my accomplishments into family celebrations, driving up for every award ceremony, every special presentation. When I won the department's Outstanding Junior Award, they surprised me by flying in for the ceremony. Seeing them in the audience, beaming with pride, made me realize that family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up for you. Last month, some interesting news reached me about my old home. One of Dad's former employees, Mike, now works as a maintenance supervisor at Goldman Sachs. He mentioned that Mom and Richard are struggling financially. They've had to remortgage the house twice, and several of Richard's business ventures have failed spectacularly. The last one, a chain of premium car washes, went bankrupt within 6 months. Madison dropped out of college and moved back home with her boyfriend and their baby. Janet's divorce left her broke, so she's living there too. The house, Dad's house, is falling into disrepair. They've tried to sell it, but the market in that area has collapsed due to a failed development project Richard was involved in. This information sparked an idea. I've been saving most of my internship earnings, and with my upcoming full-time position signing bonus, I might be able to make something happen. I've started researching property values in our old neighborhood. Uncle Robert, with his business background, has been helping me understand the legal aspects of property acquisition. The plan is taking shape in my mind: buy back Dad's house, but not to live in it. I want to convert it into something meaningful, perhaps a center for young entrepreneurs, named in Dad's honor. A place where people with dreams like his can find support and guidance. When I shared this idea with Aunt Patricia over our weekly video call, she got quiet for a moment. Then she said something that brought tears to my eyes: "You're so much like your father, Helen. He always saw opportunities where others saw problems." Uncle Robert has been incredibly supportive of my plans. He's even offered to help with the financing if needed, but this is something I want to do on my own. Dad taught me the value of building something with your own hands, and I want to honor that lesson. The irony isn't lost on me: for years ago, they threw me away like I was nothing. Now, I'm in a position to buy back what's left of Dad's legacy. I'm not doing this for revenge, though. I'm doing it because someone needs to preserve what Dad built, and it might as well be his daughter who always believed in him. I've also met someone, Michael, 22M, a fellow intern at Goldman Sachs. He's brilliant, kind, and reminds me a lot of Dad in the way he approaches problems with both intelligence and compassion. Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia adore him, especially after he spent an entire weekend helping Uncle Robert restore his vintage Mustang. Last week, while having dinner with Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia, I overheard Aunt Patricia talking to her friend on the phone about Mom. Apparently, she ran into her at the grocery store. Mom was complaining loudly about money problems and how ungrateful children never help their parents. She had the audacity to ask about me, not out of concern, but wondering if I was doing well financially. I'm sharing all this because I want to thank everyone who commented on my last post. You were right: sometimes the family you choose, or the family that chooses you, is better than the one you were born into. I'm living proof of that. Update 3, this will be my final update. Everything has come full circle in the most incredible way. After graduating from MIT and working at Goldman Sachs for a year, I finally had enough capital to execute my plan. The purchase of my old house went through surprisingly easily. They were desperate to sell. Using my business knowledge and connections, I transformed it into the James Anderson Young Entrepreneurs Center. The renovation process was therapeutic. We stripped everything down to the bare bones, removing all traces of Richard's improvements. The center now features state-of-the-art meeting rooms, a small business incubator, and a mentorship program. The bookshelf Dad built for me? I recreated it in the main conference room, now filled with business and entrepreneurship books. Many of Dad's former employees have joined as mentors. Mike, who first told me about the house's situation, is now our operations director. Together, we've already helped launch 15 small businesses, focusing particularly on the transportation and logistics sector Dad loved so much. But the real story I want to share is about my wedding day at the Mason Creek estate. Michael and I had planned everything perfectly: a beautiful garden ceremony with our real family and friends. However, Mom, Richard, and my half-brother, whom I'd never met, showed up uninvited at the front gate. "Helen," Mom screamed when she saw me in my wedding dress, "how dare you not invite your own mother to your wedding? Let us in immediately." I took a moment to really look at her. She'd aged poorly, her designer clothes obviously last season's, her makeup too heavy, her hair desperately in need of a touch-up. Richard looked thinner, more haggard, the expensive suit replaced by something off the rack. "Richard should be the one walking you down the aisle," Mom continued, her voice shrill. That made me laugh, a genuine, hearty laugh that echoed across the courtyard. "My father, the man who locked me in a room for 2 days? The man who helped you throw away your own daughter? We're family," Mom's voice cracked. "You can't just pretend we don't exist. Look at how you're living, this fancy wedding, your big job, your expensive clothes, meanwhile, we can barely make ends meet. We're drowning in debt, and you're here playing princess." There it was, the real reason for this dramatic appearance. "I'm not playing at anything," I said coldly. "I worked for everything I have. And let's be clear, you're not my family. You gave up that right years ago. My parents are inside that house. They're the ones who raised me, supported me, loved me unconditionally. You ungrateful." Mom started, but I cut her off. I turned to the security guards. "These people are strangers who are trespassing. Please remove them from the property. They are not welcome here. You can't do this." Mom screamed as the guards moved forward. "I'm your mother." "No," I said firmly. "You're just the woman who gave birth to me. There's a difference." I turned my back on her continued screams and walked away, my head held high. When I returned to the bridal suite, Aunt Patricia was waiting with a worried expression. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I took a deep breath and smiled. "You know what? I've never been better. That chapter of my life is finally completely closed. The wedding was perfect. Uncle Robert walked me down the aisle, the man who taught me to drive, who helped me with my college applications, who showed me what a father's love really means, was the one giving me away. Michael waited at the altar, tears in his eyes, as he saw me approach. During the reception, Uncle Robert gave a touching speech that had everyone crying, then made everyone laugh with embarrassing stories from my college years. Aunt Patricia danced with Michael while I danced with Uncle Robert, and I couldn't stop smiling. Looking around at my real family, my loving husband, my amazing parents who chose me, our friends who supported us through everything, I realized something profound. My story isn't about being abandoned or betrayed. It's about finding your real family, the people who love you not because they have to, but because they want to. It's about choosing happiness over bitterness, forgiveness over anger, and moving forward instead of looking back. I'm Helen Anderson Mitchell now, and I couldn't be happier with the way things turned out. Every morning, I wake up next to a man who loves me completely, run a center that helps others achieve their dreams, and every Sunday, we have dinner with the parents who chose me and never let me go.